Okay, so this is very likely to be the last trial segment of the game. If I chose the right save file. We'll soon find out. Um, and so, on this recording, I'm probably going to dip into it a bit. I'm not going to get to the end of it. Um, but this is kind of like the last chance I get at like mainline blind experiencing of this game and experiencing it on recording. And I'm going to be a little bit verbose here and strictly follow procedure while starting out this trial. So, before I do anything, I'm going to go into the court record and then systematically go through and make sure that everything is examined and that I understand what the description is of each piece of evidence and have a good idea of how that piece of evidence can be used. So this is a newspaper article. The Red-Headed League is circled in orange. And we have various other texts here, which could theoretically, in a very remote situation, be relevant to a cross-examination. However, I have read them last time, and it doesn't appear like they could be from at least first glance. But you got to make sure you kind of understand what these are. So this is about diseases. Been fewer cases reported when compared to this time last year, and smallpox is at an all-time low, thanks to vaccinations offered at the smallpox and fever hospitals throughout the various parts of London. But there's going to be another cholera epidemic. Okay, this one, it appears talking about British's wealth and notoriety in the science world. Okay. Um, Miasma is being rejected as experiment after experiment has yielded conclusive evidence in support that the physician John Snow had concluded many years prior that there is a strong correlation between contaminated water and the prevalence of certain diseases. Okay. So, I mean, contaminated water, cholera, smallpox, that kind of thing is very unrelated to the case we're trying to solve, and probably will be. That's not going to come in as some surprising twist. But that's the Red-Headed League article. But I better read the description here. An advertisement from the newspaper that's entitled to the Red-Headed League. It seems somewhat suspicious in nature. The photograph doesn't have anything you can examine. It just has a magnifying glass. We see Mr. Vigil standing in front of the gate of what appears to be a very fancy estate. Maybe that's a reference to the Baskerville Hall from The Hound of the Baskervilles. Yeah, there's like continuous unbreaking hedge that has one like gate in it, right? Like a wrought iron gate. Photographic print received from Mrs. Vigil in order to aid with locating her missing husband. He appears to have no particular distinctive facial features. Something to note here is that we have not used, I don't believe we've used this in the trial yet. I might be mistaken though. But I don't think we've used that. That's important. That might mean that we'll use it later. But it could be just like but it's part of something to drive the story forward in the investigation. It's just part of the story. She gives you this picture to identify it from, and it may not necessarily be used in the courtroom. Not all of these have to be used in the courtroom. Letter of introduction. A note of introduction on our behalf from Professor Miko Toba to Governor Caden. It's written on the back of a ticket for passage on a steamship. And this one was important. This was important last time because the name of the steamship was the SS Gauss or SS Grouse. And I forgot that. I remember hearing about grouse in some previous context, but I forgot it was the name of the steamship. And it really messed me up badly. On the back, we have some of Yujin Miko Toba's handwriting, which I thought would come up in the trial, but hasn't come up, at least not yet. We also have a corner bit off of it, but that's not something you can examine, so that essentially means that's not very important. Dismissal notice. A harsh reprimand incurred by Mr. Vigil 10 years ago that resulted in him losing his job as chief warder of Barclay Prison. And I think we probably used this. Chief Warder Daily Vigil is relieved of his post with immediate effect for having violated Clause 132 of Her Majesty's Code of Conduct for Prisons. All rights of redundancy pay and other financial benefits are fully revoked. Reason for dismissal: aiding and abetting the escape from this prison of convict. Well, Suma's dad, I don't remember exactly the name, right? Just prior to his execution. Details of this escape are still being investigated. Full cooperation with inquiries will be expected. Prison Governor Barry Caden. Or Kaiden. Additional notes. Indications are that the jailbreak plot was conceived prior to the convict's incarceration. It's believed that the convict engaged in some form of negotiation with prison staff in order to secure assistance. Full disclosure of information regarding these negotiations will be demanded. But we know that Kaiden did know about the, what are we calling them again? The Asogi Papers. So that reminds me of his last name. But he's saying that, so he kind of knows some negotiations were going on, that there was some agreement among the prison guards with Asogi to not share that he had written the Asogi Papers. A photographic print of a smiling Mrs. Vigil in her younger years. It was found on a desk at the scene of the crime. And this we did use as evidence that it was Mr. Vigil who was renting that room. And you can't. That's pretty much all I believe it's going to be used for. There isn't very much detail in it. Revolver, the murder weapon that was found at the scene of the crime on Fresno Street. Probably best to avoid handling it. And this we have not yet used. We've examined everything on it, it appears. So that's interesting. It might be yet to be used. Policeman figurine, a model of a British policeman found at the scene of the crime in Fresno Street. Giving it a twist causes a key-like shaft to pop out from the base. And we have used this, basically to show how the watch can be wound. Just deploying it just in case. And we have indeed examined that. Okay. A flame red wig found at the scene of the crime on Fresno Street. Presumably it belongs to Inspector Gregson. But does not, in fact. We saw the witnesses saw the perpetrator walking in wearing that wig. So, the perpetrator wore this wig on his way in to the apartment on Baker Street. No, that's not Baker Street. Baker Street is where Sholmes lives. Fresno Street. There we go. It's written right there. And then put it on the head of the dead body of Gregson. You can inspect it, but we've already inspected everything about it. A candle burned from the wall of the room on Fresno Street where the inspector was found dead. The top of one of the candles appears to have been blown off. And we did use this, and this was shown. Our argument was that this was a time bomb, essentially. That's how this was going to be used, and we already inspected everything on it. Gregson's photograph. An old photographic print displayed rather prominently in Inspector Gregson's office. The person on the left is Lord Clint Van Zieks. It is. And we can magnify it still. Magnify it by no examines. We have not used this. So it's yet to be used. The autopsy report from the examination of Inspector Gregson's body. According to the coroner, Dr. Gorey, an accurate estimation of the time of death is not possible. So, Tobias Gregson, male, age 45, nationality British. Time of death indeterminate. Evidence suggests some measures have been taken to disguise the time of death. The coroner was Mariah Gorey. Cause of death. The victim was shot in the chest at close range from the front, resulting in instant death. Scorch marks are at point of entry. The bullet exited the body from behind. Additional observations. The caliber of the gun used matches that of a standard issue firearms for members of the judiciary. Crime scene floor plan. Okay. A plan of the small room in the building of flats on Fresno Street where the body of the victim, Inspector Gregson, was found. By the way, I didn't mention this was indeed used at least once, but it seems like it's something useful and could be used again. This was used to point out the location we thought that the notice board was at when Van Zieks went into the room. The notice board, a freestanding notice board completely covered in notes and articles relating to the victims of the Reaper. There is a bloody handprint on the back side. We've used this extensively in previous trial segments. Looks like we have indeed inspected everything about it. Venus firecrackers. The Venus special firecracker consisting of 100 smaller fireworks at 6 pence each. It goes off like a gunshot. This was used, well, I better inspect this just to make sure everything's inspected, even though it probably won't matter. But we used this to show that the gunshot that the witnesses, that would be Venus and Sandwich, could have heard was not actually the gun going off. Gregson was killed with the gun a long time ago. It was just these fireworks going off, and they were wrapped around the candlestick, and as the candlestick burned down, they lit the wick on the fireworks. Somehow the perpetrator managed to time the burning of a candle perfectly, a candle that he hadn't even used before, so that the gunshot sound would go off right after Van Zieks would walk in, which he wouldn't know exactly when that would happen either. That's kind of ridiculous and hard to believe, but Ace Attorney does ridiculous things like that sometimes. Okay, now we have, I don't think that's going to come into doubt. I think we're supposed to just accept that, but it is ridiculous. So, but a well-used piece of evidence, nothing like left sort of well-milked. The photograph, which we have surprisingly not used, but there isn't very much in it. Just some chicken blood, the wig, Gregson, nothing really special about Gregson, his butt maybe. A photographic print of the victim, Inspector Gregson. His body appears to be tightly curled up, and there is a red hairpiece on his head. Gregson's pocket watch. Inspector Gregson's pocket watch that he wound without fail every single day. Having wound it up, it started ticking again. And we have used this extensively, and the idea was, if he died yesterday, he would have wound it yesterday, and so at the time of that trial day, it would have still been ticking. And it wasn't still ticking, which means that it ran out. But it could have still ticked. It wasn't broken, which means it just ran out of wind. Wait. Yeah, this was obvious. A perfect fit. I knew it. Yes, technically this is new dialogue. Alright, perhaps you knew it. I'll take a note of this new information at once. Okay. Inspector's identification. Inspector Gregson police identification. It's the official warrant card issued to him by Scotland Yard. And he didn't have this on him at the time of his murder because he loaned it to Mr. Vigil. So that Mr. Vigil can impersonate him. So that no one would know that he was going to the SS Buria to potentially kill Seishiro. Maybe. We don't know exactly what he was doing. A photograph taken at the foyer of the Great Waterloo Hotel on the morning of Professor Mikotoba and Judge Jigoku's arrival in London for the symposium. We have not used this yet, but it might serve as an alibi for somebody. That might be its purpose. Now examine just a magnifying glass. The Asogi Papers, the last will and testament of Great Genshin Asogi that Mr. Vigil claims disappeared after the convict's execution. Apparently, Mr. Asogi described it as the only weapon I have left. So, I, Genshin Asogi, hereby request that upon my death, any and all material possessions and wealth belonging to me in London be delivered to my son, Kazuma Asogi, in the Empire of Japan. His name is Genshin Asogi. It is with deep sadness that I accept my fate in this foreign land, in the knowledge that I will never see my homeland or family again. but I regret nothing about my chosen path. Gregson's trunk. Inspector Gregson's metal traveling trunk that was removed from the scene, but subsequently recovered by Gina. Something else to note is we have not used this yet, so that's yet to be used. And we can open the trunk, and inside we find Gregson's visa and the piece of sword. Right. Flint's autopsy report. The report from the autopsy of the professor's final victim. It's signed by Dr. John H. Wilson, who carried out the procedure, though Professor Mikotoba actually pinned the report. Right, and so it's in Professor Mikotoba's handwriting. But still, for some reason, Herlock Sholmes claims that Professor Mikotoba is not Iris's father. So when he said that it was Iris's father who was his assistant, he just basically lied. You don't know who Iris's father even is. And maybe that's the whole point of the game. We may never learn who Iris's father really is. Unless let's say Shiro. John Coroner, or it's Strongheart. Anyway, Coroner John H. Wilson, victim Clint Van Zeek's male, age 33, nationality British, time of death 31st of May between 9 p.m. and midnight. Death from a single stab wound to the heart, other superficial external wounds indicative of a duel. Additional notes. Recent scarlet ink stains visible on the little and ring fingers of the right hand, but no document in corresponding ink was found. Vital evidence recovered from the victim's stomach during autopsy, which we don't know what that is yet. Credit to Inspector Gregson for petitioning so doggedly for the autopsy procedure. No internal trauma noted anywhere in the body. Signed, John H. Wilson. And I presume it's the same John H. Wilson that was murdered. We have not used this yet, so it might become important. A little doll of Mr. Sholmes in hair form. I've been told to tug on its ears if I run out of options in the trial today. This is a walkie-talkie. It's used to call Mr. Sholmes. It's not really evidence. The passport. Okay, not visa passport, but whatever. A passport document that was in Inspector Gregson's possession. It was issued for travel to France the day before his body was discovered. I believe this has been used. Depart 1 week from 31st of October, and he departed on the 31st of October on the dot. Passport number ACD0522. Hopefully that doesn't come up because that's obscure. Destination, Port of Dunkirk, France. Purpose of travel, police business. Notes permission for the applicant and one additional person to travel, and that one additional person was Kazuma Asogi. The great sword Kuruma, the illustrious blade passed down through generations of the Asogi clan. The prized sword's tip has a small piece missing, and we have used this, and we have inspected it and shown that piece is indeed missing, and then presented that to show that the end of Kazuma's sword is what ended up in Gregson's trunk. Evacuation drill itinerary. I noticed about a practice evacuation to be carried out by the crew of the SS Grouse the night before the ship arrived in Dover. It was found in Terji Goku's cabin. This might be an opportunity to put the body of Gregson in the fridge. Following the departure of the Port of Dunkirk, all crew members are required to assemble on the main deck at 10 p.m. in order to review evacuation procedures. The drill will take 20 minutes. Crew to resume duties as soon as the drill is over. So we have a 20-minute drill there. This has not been used yet, so it will be used. A small machine part that Mr. Sholmes found in Judge Jigoku's cabin on the SS Grouse. It's now clear that it's the missing crown of Inspector Gregson's pocket watch. And we've done inspecting it. Telegram from Japan. These are the four names. K. Asogi, A. Shin, T. Gregson, J. Wilson. Asogi is grouped with Shin, and Gregson is grouped with Wilson, suggesting that A. Shin was sent... Shin was, or maybe the other way around, doesn't matter. Shin was sent to kill John H. Wilson. Asogi was sent to kill Gregson. Cool. Now we go look at the people. Susato does not very intriguing. I mean, she's the daughter of Yujin. So she's like the daughter of Watson. Is our assistant just as Watson was Sholmes' assistant. But she's kind of like Maya Fey. There's not really a whole big secret about her anymore. Mr. Sholmes, who just turned out to pretty much just be Mr. Sholmes. Although he does know Van Zieks and Strongheart from the past. He just sort of tends to know people. Iris Wilson, some orphaned young girl. We don't know how Sholmes came across her. He did so somehow. Like, he took her in for some reason. And we don't know who her parents are. And it's weird. And I don't know if we'll ever know. But definitely isn't. She's very likely not a culprit or culprit. Really have much to do with this case or be anything suspicious. Really, she might come in as a machine at some point. Yujin Mikotoba, he's Watson. Seishiro Jigoku. So this is why this guy's important, but I'll explain why later. Inspector Lestrade, although quite a bit different than in the original Sherlock Holmes, but yes. Now, she just lost her warrant card. We'll see what happens though at the end of the trial. She insists that Gregson wasn't carrying out any murders, which we'll touch on that later also. Mr. Strongheart, get back to him later. Brock Van Zieks, kind of like Edgeworth, right? He's the jaded prosecutor guy who ends up like framed up for a crime by his boss, very likely, in the last trial. And then he learns to appreciate defense lawyers. Generally a pretty good guy, and just kind of a normal dude, honestly. Not that important. Was the person to report this guy missing. The guy who was renting the room, and what he was doing was Gregson was up to doing some weird stuff, and so he was there to give alibis for Gregson, so that it would be hard to figure out what weird stuff Gregson was doing. That weird stuff, like characters like Ryan Asuke was suspicious, was he was murdering people who got off when Van Zieks was trying to prosecute them, and attempt to build up this image of Van Zieks being this murderous person, this Reaper of the Bailey. But we don't know what Gregson's motivation for that would be, as that would actually make Van Zieks kind of look bad. And Ryan Asuke, off of Gina's prompting, is starting to change his mind, just based on Gina pleading with him to change his mind, that Gregson actually at least wasn't trying to commit a murder in this case. And it's like the way that's set up is like, it's like the hero's willpower belief fails or is in vain if Gregson really was ordering these murders to be done. And so it suggests that he was not somehow, even though all the evidence suggests that he was, along with a Shin, were going around murdering people. And a Shin, but the thing is, a Shin doesn't, here's a little like caveat, a Shin likely doesn't work for Gregson. We'll get back to that later. The warder, he may have been complicit in the escape of Mr. Asogi, Genshin Asogi, but won't admit to it, and just throws Vigil under the bus. Gregson, who's just like this guy, Inspector Gumshoe kind of guy, who suddenly, like on this heel turn, turned into this murder guy in this last case. Kazuma, who was tasked to go to Britain by somebody, specifically to kill Gregson. That was his task, and was shipped to Britain under the guise of being someone to learn, like a legal exchange student, to learn how to be a defense lawyer. He went about his job very well, and indeed murdered Gregson. And he did so with Gregson on the SS Buria, which we presume Gregson was ordered to take Kazuma with him on the SS Buria. Whoever gave him that order and Kazuma were working together, so they're setting up his murder. Then Kazuma murdered Gregson in Seishiro's cabin on the SS Buria, while Seishiro might have been present and witnessed it, which involved trying to get to Gregson with his sword, but missing and embedding the tip in the case. It's like Gregson caught the tip of the sword in his case or something, but seems like eventually just ended up shooting Gregson with Gregson's own gun. Somehow that happened. And the bullet went through Gregson all the way and embedded itself in the wall of the cabin that Seishiro was staying in. So he then proceeded to put Gregson's body in the fridge so that it would cool down and it would be more difficult to assess what the time of death was. And somehow his opportunity to do that is probably related to the emergency evacuation drill or something. So that raises the question: who hired or ordered Asogi Kazuma to kill Gregson? Well, two people, one in Japan and one in Britain, collaborated and made an agreement of an exchange of assassins. So, a Japanese assassin would come to murder a Japanese person in Britain in exchange for a British assassin to go murder a British person in Japan. Actually, he didn't try to murder Seishiro. That's what Seishiro was suspicious of. He murdered Gregson. So it's actually send over a Japanese assassin to murder a British person in Britain, and send over a British assassin to murder a British person in Japan. Only the British people get killed, apparently. So that was, I don't know, so two people agreed on that. They both wanted Gregson dead and Johnny Twilson dead, and they're both related to the Professor case. Gregson is the one who ordered the autopsy, insisted on the autopsy happening, and Johnny Twilson was the one who performed the autopsy and approved of Gregson's ordering, the autopsy revealing evidence in the stomach of Clint Van Zeeks that pointed supposedly to Genshin Asogi being the culprit, which we don't know what that evidence is. So these are both closely related to the whole Professor case, the Hound case, the Genshin Asogi case, whatever you want to call it. And they're the two people that needed to be killed. So still we need to cover that up. The person that and a telegram was one of the telegram describing this agreement. One of them was sent to Seishiro. So that's going to go back to the importance of Seishiro. Seishiro is important because he agreed to this assassin thing for some reason. He's part of the plot. So who is the person with Britain who we agreed with? I think the best choice here is Strongheart. And I really would like it to be Strongheart because then I'd be right about my guess. I keep thinking Strongheart's going to be a big villain eventually. So Seishiro and Strongheart agreed amongst each other to do this assassin exchange. So it's either you could say either Seishiro or Strongheart is the one who hired or ordered Kazuma to go kill Gregson and sent him to Britain to do so. And Strongheart manipulating around Kazuma's position, making him the assistant to Van Zeeks, and so on, is related to that whole plan, right? And he's, again, Strongheart, it would be the guy who's giving orders to Gregson, and ordered Gregson to take Kazuma along with him to try to assassinate Seishiro. Hopefully, Seishiro not actually being killed because the plan is for Kazuma to get Gregson first, and that plan succeeded. So Now, Kazuma is our old best friend, and perhaps even you could consider him the future fiance of Susato, potentially. Susato definitely really looked up to him. Kazuma, you could argue that he was hired to do the hitman job. He was hired to assassinate Gregson, and now he's what his job is. I don't know if that doesn't really help that much. But what makes it worse is, Kazuma, having held a grudge against Van Zieks, decided to go above and beyond his mission of killing Gregson and used the assassination of Gregson as an opportunity to frame up Van Zieks for murdering Gregson, and did so. So, Kazuma, it turns out, is a pretty bad dude, honestly, and did some bad stuff just recently. Anyway, that's kind of the tragedy of this whole thing, is this big hero that fought alongside you at the beginning, and then tragically dies, and then miraculously is still alive, turns out to be just a terrible person. Great, it's pretty creative, I like it. Gossip, he is just Vigil. Venus, kind of a filler character used to introduce the fireworks and just be cute. Sandwich, another filler character. This Red-Headed League people, just so that we can use this to pinpoint Gossip actually being Vigil. They're not really that important to the case. Something about, well, her eyes aren't pink, something about white hair girls. Anyway, cutie pie who likes to cut up people. So now that's done, a half an hour in, we're going to jump actually into the trial itself. Yeah, here we go. Before we begin today, I have a brief announcement. As with the closed trial 10 years ago, some astonishing facts have come to light in these proceedings. The revelation that the well-known Reaper is actually the organization illegally executing its own brand of justice. And the discovery that a respected yard inspector was at its heart until he himself perished in an assassination plot. So they think that Gregson was the Reaper, but Gia Lestrade denies it, and Rinosuke sort of denies it. Well, I say to all members of the judiciary here present on this occasion, that we will stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth behind these disturbing findings. Now, Strongheart probably has a motivation to make everyone believe that it was Gregson and Gregson alone who was doing the Reaper things, and he wasn't taking orders from anybody up above. Counsels, you will undertake this trial with the resolve to pursue the truth to the bitter end. Although he is talking very heroically here. Resolve, yes, that's my intention. My lord, if I may inquire, the defendant may speak. On what grounds is Kasuma Asogi permitted to continue in his role as prosecutor? That's a good point. He has admitted to colluding with the victim in a plot to assassinate an innocent man. He shouldn't be enjoying the privilege of freedom, let alone be leading the prosecution. That brings up the question, what other prosecutors do we have? Do we have a British cousin of Winston Payne? I submitted a written petition to Lord Strongheart, requesting that judgment of my transgressions be delayed by 1 day. You did what? In today's proceedings, I intend to expose everything. My whole life, for the last 10 years, has been leading up to this 1 day. Kazuma? Whatever the outcome of this trial, I give my word that I will accept whatever punishment is deemed appropriate, however severe. And I suggest you prepare yourself for the same, Reaper. He's still going on this, but something about that gives me a feeling that Kazuma actually knows everything. He knows how this is going to end already. Kazuma is bristling with hostility today. I get the distinct impression we're heading into a very dangerous territory. Is that really even Kazuma-sama standing before us? As an extreme exception to normal practices, I have granted this prosecutor's request. Why, though? The defense finds this acceptable, I presume. Yes, my lord. I would say, well, this seems somewhat strange to me, but I don't object. In that case, in the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby declare this court to be in session again. We resume the closed hearing of Barak von Zieks. The defense is ready, my lord. The prosecution is more than ready. Very well, then. This preamble has taken long enough. That's meta. Prosecutor Asogi, begin! As you wish, my lord. The prosecution calls the first witness to the stand. Bring Seishiro Jigoku into the courtroom. So this guy presumably would have witnessed Kazuma killing Gregson, but we'll see what he says, though. At last, then, we've reached the final battle. He's putting literally everything on the line now, in order to get to the truth. Come on, Ryonosuke. It's time for that steely resolve, because this is going to test it to the limit. Witness, state your name and occupation for the court. Ah. So it was you who issued this, was it? Subpoena? Your subpoena? I did what was necessary. Ha 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 ha. Well, look what the young man has become. I didn't think I'd see the day when you take that tone with me, I must say. The witness will ensure his responses are pertinent to the questions asked. My name is Seishiro Jigoku, a Supreme Court judge from the Empire of Japan. 16 years ago, this man came to London as a visiting student. 6 years later, he returned to Japan. As well as presiding over the Supreme Court, he is also currently Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs. I am, of course, fully aware of Mr. Jigoku and his preeminent roles. I invited him personally to the International Forensic Science Symposium as a representative of his country. I hear he also played a key role in the conclusion of the Anglo-Japanese Treaty of Friendship and Navigation. It was a great honor to be involved in the negotiations. I put my all into that treaty. Judge Jigoku, I must ask. Well, I never. Fancy the young murdering student turning up here of all places. You acquitted me yourself. And now, I'm a practicing defense lawyer. Yes, and full of self-importance like your friend across the courtroom. I see. You came here to London by invitation to the International Forensic Science Symposium. But then, without informing anyone of your plans, you took flight to France. Took flight? I have to object to that turn of phrase. Then explain yourself. What exactly were the circumstances? Well, I was somewhat expecting this. And I'm sorry to say, I decline to comment. What? Leaving the country prematurely when I was an invited guest may be questionable etiquette. But my decision is unrelated to this case. I can't be bound to testify. Your decision is extremely related to this case. You lie. Unrelated, you say? I feel you, Strongheart. I appreciate that a respected police inspector has been killed, for which I offer my condolences. However, being an alien, I'd obviously never met the man, nor do I know the first thing about him. We do not have a picture of Jigoku and Gregson together, I presume. As such, I am in no position to testify. It's as simple as that. The thing is, though, he is the one who insisted on the autopsy in the inspector case. So he has some relation. So you would run from all this? I beg your pardon? This case is more far-reaching than the murder of Inspector Gregson. It has ties to another murder, a case that was tried in Japan almost a year ago now. A year ago in Japan. The murder of Dr. John H. Wilson, you mean? That's right. And you, Judge Jigoku, are at the heart of both cases. The defense has evidence to prove it. Well, Ryonosuke, I see from the look in your eyes that you're resolved to carry this through to the very end, too. Let's see your evidence, then. What proof do you have that Seishiro Jigoku is involved in this case? Now, the first thing I'm thinking of is that telegraph. So I'm going to present it.
Take that!
This is the telegram detailing a communication sent between Britain and Japan approximately 1 year ago. The communication contained 4 names: Kei Asogi, A. Shin, T. Gregson, and J. Wilson. You little. Where did you get that? In Tokyo. From your office, Judge Jigoku. What? How on earth did you... What's this all about? Why is my name on that list? This list of 4 names follows a certain pattern. T. Gregson and J. Wilson are the names of victims. Kei Asogi and A. Shin are the names of assassins. No. A year ago in Tokyo, Dr. John H. Wilson's life was taken in a Western-style restaurant in the capital. The culprit was found to be a visiting student who went by the name of Giselle Brett, but her real name was Asa Shin, a professional killer sent on a mission to kill from Great Britain. A. Shin and her victim J. Wilson, and the murder that just took place here in London was the counterpart of that crime. Assassin sent from Japan, also a visiting student, Kusuma Asogi, whose victim was British Police Inspector Tobias Gregson. Kei Asogi and T. Gregson. One assassin from each country to kill a target residing in the other, although they were both British. What exactly is the defense suggesting? These 2 cases of murder, one that took place in Britain and one in Japan, were masterminded by a pair of individuals from each country as a form of assassin exchange. And the telegram the defense has acquired is proof of this international contract to kill. What? The telegram was found in your office, Judge Jigoku. In other words, the mastermind in Japan was you. Judge Jigoku? What's this all about? And you, Kazuma? You lied. During yesterday's proceedings, you acknowledged that you'd accepted the assassination mission. But the mark wasn't Judge Jigoku at all. It was T. Gregson, Detective Inspector of Scotland Yard, as shown by the name on the killing contract. Very impressive, Ryonosuke. But actually, I didn't lie. The name of the target I was ordered to kill never passed my lips yesterday. The idea of that Seishiro Jigoku was the mark came entirely from you. If I rewatch it, maybe that'll make sense. I thought my introduction when I was reading through all the evidence and people, I did say that Kazuma lied about it. So I got kind of gaslighted. I was under the same misconception as Ryonosuke was. You deliberately avoid saying the name. The defense claims these 4 names indicate some sort of international assassin exchange. I'm sure I speak for all present when I say that the very idea seems utterly absurd. Well, Mr. Jigoku, what do you have to say for yourself? His silence only goes to prove his guilt. Ooh, we're going crazy here. There's another very important point that this new development brings to light. There's now a distinct possibility that the scene of Inspector Gregson's actual murder was in the witness's cabin aboard the SS Grouse. Judge Jigoku, you have to testify now. To refuse would put you in a contempt of court. Ha 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 ha. There is no need for quite such a vicious stare, young man. Very well then. As a parting gift to you all, I'll tell you everything I know. Strongheart's hoping he doesn't tell about him. It seems this Japanese gentleman has informed information that the court must hear about the alleged assassin exchange and the events of the night of the 31st of October. Present your formal testimony now. As you wish, my lord. I can see why he was afraid that he was going to get murdered, though, because he had baggage on Strongheart, potentially. And Strongheart might have wanted to bury that baggage. It's true that Kazuma Asogi was assigned the assassination mission 1 year ago now. The target was Inspector T. Gregson. That was a condition of the British study tour. However, in the end, something happened that meant the young man was unable to carry out his mission. On the evening in question, a member of the crew was on duty outside my cabin at all times. If there had been a shot fired, the crewman would have heard it, so clearly I can't be involved. So you admit it then. As this communication suggests, there really was an assassin exchange arrangement between Britain and Japan. A political endeavor at the highest levels. Not something I can discuss here. To use such a worthy practice as foreign study to coerce someone to commit murder. It's the most appalling thing I've ever heard. Appalling? Well, it's easy to judge. Pardon? Asogi had a reason for taking his sword to that British inspector, you know. What? Which is why he accepted the mission in the first place. Isn't that right, Counsel? Kazuma-sama. Right. Gregson was one of the people instrumental in convicting Genshin. Judge Jigoku, if you are the mastermind behind this operation in Japan, then tell the court the identity of your counterpart in Britain. I am not obliged to divulge that information. As I said yesterday, I've killed nobody. I freely admit that I accepted the mission, but on the night the plan was to be executed, I backed out. In short, this assassination exchange that the defense has identified is unrelated to the events of this case. Yeah, except that Gregson somehow turned up dead. Quite a coincidence that you went to kill him and he ended up dead, but apparently you didn't kill him. The crucial point is this. Your police inspector can't have perished aboard that steamship in Dunkirk. Because if he'd been shot in the cabin, it's inconceivable that a member of the crew would have heard it. Wouldn't have heard it. That's right. Gregson was killed after returning to London, in the room on Fresno Street. And the perpetrator of the crime was the Reaper, Barak von Zieks. Wow, that is so dead and buried by now, Kazuma, you are clinging. The prosecution's accusation remains unchanged. It is to remind you what the rules are in this trial, right? Like, that there actually is somebody named as a defendant. You think that is seemingly innocent foreign exchange program was a facade for such Machiavellian dealings. Clearly, it's a plot only a government minister and high-ranking judge such as the witness could hope to execute. And me. Well, I seem to recall that there was someone on the British side who controlled everything. But that as it may, it is not the place of this court to pursue this villainous assassin exchange plot. We are concerned only with the tangible events pertaining to the murder of Inspector Gregson. Well, that is sus. Is the defense clear on that point, counsel? Yes, my lord. I'll keep that in mind as I Cross-examine the witness. Yes, Mr. Strongheart. Okay, and I agree that it is indeed true. I don't think we need to refute this. A year ago, when Kazuma was still in Japan then. Correct. It was at the examination center for applicants for the study tour that I approached him. I'll never forget it. I remember exactly what you said. You just came out and asked me forthright if I consider traveling to Britain on an assassination mission. Surely not. I thought it was a joke at first, of course, but then it was made clear to me that if I didn't accept, I wouldn't be considered for the study tour. So you agreed to it just for that? I mean, I know how much you wanted to study in England, but assassination? The Empire of Japan had accepted a proposal from the British Empire at the time. An agreement to send a student from each country to the others to deepen cultural understanding and friendship. But behind the scenes, the chosen students were to be given assassination missions. I had no choice but to accept the proposal that originated from my British counterpart. Why didn't you expose the plot there and then? Britain acknowledges no part in these alleged misbegotten dealings. I advise you not to make spurious allegations, Foreign Minister Jigoku. As a witness, I am bound to tell the truth, my lord. Anyway, I picked Asogi and explained the details of the plan to him. The target was Inspector T. Gregson. That was a condition of the British study tour. And I believe that is true as well. I don't need to refute this. Why Kazuma? Why did you pick him as the assassin? Because he agreed to it. Duh. He was the most capable of all of the applicants, and in addition, I knew his desire to travel to Britain was very strong. In fact, it was almost more than a desire, it was his whole purpose in life. Yes, as his best friend, I can certainly attest to that. The way he threw himself into his studies, the way he pursued becoming qualified as a lawyer. It was all ultimately for the one single goal of being accepted on a study tour to Britain. And of course, we know the reason behind that. He was determined to find out for himself the truth about his father, Genshin Asogi. There's nothing I wouldn't have done to get here. But that agreeing to assume the role of an assassin or betraying people's trust. Be that. Well, you certainly did a fine job of betraying mine, Asogi. But why was Inspector Gregson the target? I have no idea. Those were the orders from Britain. I had no position to question them. It's related to the Inspector case, the Professor case, and covering up everybody who knew important stuff about it, but whatever. You have no idea, really? I find that hard to believe. Oh, you do? Oh, do you? Denshi Goku was once a visiting student here in Britain himself, of course. Perhaps he has some connection with Inspector Gregson from that time. The defense really ought to catch up. With what? With the fact that the assassin exchange has absolutely nothing to do with the case under scrutiny here. Yes, I've already admitted to recruiting Asogi. However, in the end something happened that meant the young man was unable to carry out his mission. And this is incorrect, so it's something we could theoretically refute if we had the evidence. I presume you're referring to the incident that occurred during Kazuma's passage to Britain in January. Had to take a unfortunately long pause there. Continuing. I forgot if I read this line. I'll assume I did. The awful tragedy that took place on the steamship. Word arrived at the ministry some 2 weeks after the ship's departure from our shores. The visiting student had been killed, but his body had somehow gone missing in Hong Kong. The news was wired to me from a detective I'd placed on the ship to accompany the assassin. Obviously, Kazuma didn't actually die at all. But he did lose his memory, including all the details about his special mission. Supposedly. Do you not consider dispatching another assassin at that point? Did you not? That wasn't possible. Simply because that black-clad young student over there had already put himself forward as a Sogi's replacement. And there was no way to stop him from reaching Britain. Ah. My hands were completely tied. So Mr. Schulb's strategy worked perfectly. He predicted everything that would happen. Months later, my memory returned. But I never intended to go through with the assassination mission anyway. So you were playing me right from the outset, were you? Is that it? I'd sooner be guilty of that crime than of taking someone else's life. But you did do it, though. I was prepared to do whatever I had to do in order to get myself here to Britain. This line of questioning has gone on long enough. All the court should be concerned about is the testimony given by this witness. Are details relating to his relationship with Inspector Gregson and the victim's murder. You are very suspicious, Mr. Strongheart. In that case, as I've already made perfectly clear, I had no connection to the man or his death. And you have some means of substantiating this plea. This is something that's kind of like a point of like a hard fact, which makes it easy to question. So this tips me off as something easy to present on. Outside your cabin in the first-class area of the SS Grouse, you mean? Yes, that's right. Not least because there was a murderer of a student passenger earlier in the year, I imagine. The liner operators had taken to posting a crewman outside every first-class cabin door. I can confirm the presence of the crewman guard myself. What do you mean? Because I accompanied Inspector Gregson to Dunkirk that night. I witnessed it with my own eyes. There was a small man. There was a well-built crewman standing guard directly in front of the door to the witness's cabin. At that particular time, of course, I'd gone to the ship's dining room for dinner. The inspector and I asked the crewman to allow us into the cabin while we waited for Judge Jigoku's return. I suppose Inspector Gregson was there in his capacity as the Reaper. He was intending to take the witness's life. No, Ryanosuke. You are wrong. Exactly, as I've said numerous times now, I had no intention of killing anyone. You would also be lying. So the crewman let two potential assassins into the cabin he was supposed to be guarding. Not the most convincing of sentries, really. In truth, those are my thoughts too. But anyway, I stayed to talk with Inspector Gregson for a short while, and then I left him there and made my way off the ship alone. Was the guard still at the door when you went? Yes. He glared at me as I walked past. You see, that proves it. If there'd been a shot fired, the crewman would have heard it, so surely I can't be involved. This is also interesting, but I don't think we have the evidence to present on this. Like, we don't have stuff like the wadded up shirt in the hole or whatever.
Hold it!
In the speaking bell. The crewman who was standing directly outside your cabin door, you mean? That's right. A muscular man with a permanent grim expression on his face. He didn't move from that spot. To be honest, I thought he was a miserable fellow. But as it happens, he is a vital witness now. Well, he's not here in the stand. There's no doubt that Gregson was killed by a gunshot, and it's inconceivable that a crewman standing just outside the cabin door would have heard it. But wait, what about the ship's enormous steam engines? The noise of them could have drowned out the sound of the gun being fired. Sadly, young judicial assistant, that won't wash. Oh? You'll recall that my cabin was in the first-class area of the ship, which is also, of course, the quietest. Don't imagine for a moment that it's anything like steerage where the judicial assistants go. I didn't mean... but a hole like that made by a bullet was found in your cabin, Judge Shigoku. That's compelling evidence that a gun was fired in there. What's that? A bullet hole? Oh yes, you're talking about what the detective uncovered in the wall yesterday, I presume. That was obviously a rotten panel eaten out by woodworm. No doubt he didn't find an actual bullet. That's the hole in this argument. Sadly, I was unable to arrange for the crewman to be brought back to Britain with me. But obviously, if a gun had been fired in my cabin on the night in question, as the defense implies, I would have been arrested on the spot, and would never have made it to Britain in the first place. The problem is that was there an effort to cover up that hole? Very true. The witness's logic is sound. Since no gunshot was heard from the witness's cabin on the night in question, we must assume that the witness is telling the truth. Hey. I'm glad you've seen sense, my lord. I know Kazuma's already admitted to taking on this incredible assassination plot, but even so, hearing it confirmed by someone else is still a real shock. It's unforgivable, using Kazuma-sama's feelings to manipulate him into agreeing to such a despicable plan. But I think Kazuma manipulated Judge Shigoku too. He completely double-crossed him. Oh dear, it's hard not to see that as a stroke of brilliance on Kazuma-sama's part. One way or another, though, Gregson ended up dead. I really think that the murder must have happened aboard the steamship. So you mean, Judge Shigoku must be lying? I know I shouldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. But you must destroy him, Mr. Naruhodo. So let's look at these again. So, the first cross-examination of every trial is always the one that gets me. So this is to show that, Gregson actually went into the cabin. So we'll see if we can put that on anything. Let's look at the evacuation drill again. Following departure from the port of Dunkirk, all crew members are required to assemble on the main deck at 10 p.m. in order to review evacuation procedures. The drill will take 20 minutes. Crew to resume duties as soon as the drill is over. Now, this is on the 31st of October. Now, the murder happened when, look at the autopsy report. It's upon arrival in Dunkirk, right? Or just before arrival in Dunkirk? Following departure from the port of Dunkirk. Oh, this is on the way in. Okay. Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, so this is probably the evidence we use to show that there was no crewman there. So this is wrong, but I don't think this is what we refute. I mean, I guess this is true, so let me try to refute this.
Objection!
Good, the music stopped. Yes, as the court has heard, there was a crewman posted outside Judge Shigoku's cabin. However, we can be sure that contrary to the witness's claim, the guard wasn't there at all times. What? I have here a notice of a particular event that was scheduled to take place aboard the steamship on the 31st. Where did you get that? It's evidence gathered by Mr. Herlock Sholmes. You were acquainted yesterday, if you remember. Herlock Sholmes again. According to this itinerary, after leaving the port of Dunkirk at exactly 10 p.m., and for a period of 20 minutes, all crewmen of the SS Grouse were together on deck for an evacuation drill. All crewmen were away from their posts, and during that 20-minute interval, of course, any gunshots emanating from your cabin would have been heard by no one. In summary, Judge Shigoku, you had ample opportunity to commit the crime. But it wasn't Judge Shigoku who did it.
Objection.
At 20-minute window of opportunity, it's an excellent find, Ryanosuke, but amounts to nothing. Why? Because the witness clearly stated in his testimony, no incident occurred in his cabin. Unless you have some decisive evidence that can show his testimony to be false. Your accusation is nothing more than conjecture. Very true. Well, counsel. Here we go with the knob. Inspector Gregson was killed in Judge Shigoku's cabin that night. I am certain of it. Because the defense has the evidence to prove it. You will present the evidence for the defense at once, counsel. What proof do you have that the victim's life was taken in Judge Shigoku's cabin on the 31st of October? Present. Judge Shigoku, this was found in your cabin yesterday. What is that? The crown of a pocket watch? A pocket watch. And if you will observe, the victim's pocket watch, which we know he treasured, is missing precisely that part. It can't be. Moreover, this crown is a perfect fit on the spindle protruding from the victim's watch. Now, the fact that this was retrieved from Judge Shigoku's cabin tells us that the victim's watch almost certainly broke there. In other words, the victim was killed on the 31st during the 20-minute evacuation drill. In the cabin occupied by you, Judge Shigoku. Well, you're razor sharp, aren't you, you young murderer?
Objection.
Expertly maneuvered, Ryanosuke. And your argument sounds entirely plausible. At first. But rather like this pocket watch, it's full of cracks. What? And I believe Judge Shigoku feels the same way. I was wrong to acquit you earlier in the year. Sorry. If I know that it would result in anyone having to listen to this drivel, I would have declared you guilty just to spare the world your ridiculous bombast. I think it's clear that the witness will have to give further testimony. When you hear what actually happened in my cabin that night, you'll notice the pitfall into which you've stumbled. Prior to your renewed testimony, I would like to clarify one point. The fact that this part of the victim's watch was discovered in your cabin means that you acknowledge she was there, I presume? Yes, I do. Very well then. You may proceed to give your formal testimony about what exactly happened in your cabin aboard the ship on the evening of the 31st of October. Of course. As a man of the law, I have no intention of obstructing justice. This is the first time I've noticed that this occurred on Halloween. I had a guest waiting for me when I returned to my cabin, after finishing my evening meal in the dining room. When I walked through the door, a mustachioed Englishman was there, foolishly waving a gun at me. I soon took care of him with an épée throw, though he couldn't wait to run away after that. I imagine his watch was broken when I threw him over my shoulder. It was nothing to do with his murder. The inspector was clearly killed having returned to Britain, because his body was found in London. Ipon soy? Oh. Ipon Seiyui. I don't know how you would spell that. A common jujutsu, martial arts technique in my country. We like to say jujutsu in English, but it's like jujutsu. I was careful not to use too much force, but the man obviously landed too heavily for his watch to take. So, Ryanosuke Naruhodo, I imagine you can see the flaw in your logic now, can't you? I don't see what the flaw is exactly. That was clearly false testimony. What? The fact that the pocket watch was broken in the witness's cabin is no way proves the victim's murder took place there. Well, it gets closer. You're asserting that he was never there to begin with, so we need to get you to take this one step at a time. I've no doubt the inspector intended to kill me, but he didn't manage to pull the trigger. Yes, because he was merely the tactician, not the reaper's hand of death. Well, the testimony appears to make perfect sense as far as I can tell. You are an idiot. Actually, you are not. You know exactly what happened. You are playing like an idiot. Let me express my deep gratitude for your understanding, my lord. But if this testimony holds, Daichigoku will be deemed to have no involvement in the case. Well, counsel, I really see no reason for wasting precious court time here on a cross-examination. Sorry, my lord. The defense has a right to a cross-examination, and I don't intend to squander that. You're an embarrassment to your countrymen, not knowing when you're beaten. In that case, proceed, Mr. Naruhodo. Who was this? Because the so-called guard posted at your cabin door, had just let your killer pass, you mean? Apparently, Gregson told the crewman he was a police inspector, which was the truth, of course. Yeah, but he didn't have any identification because he gave that away. He wouldn't have had his identification with him, though. He had his trench coat and mustache, not to mention the bag of chips. I imagine the crewman was convinced. But the man accompanying him would have had 2 swords slung around his waist. You mean me? Who else? Yes, that's true. You would have hoped the sight of a few swords might have set off alarm bells in the guard's head. The point is, I left the cabin before its occupant returned, and I immediately disembarked the ship. Certainly, all I can tell you is that only the inspector was waiting for me when I arrived back at my cabin. And you entered without any inkling of suspicion? That's right. None whatsoever. Okay, when I walked through the door, a mustached Englishman was there, foolishly waving a gun at me.
Hold it!
Obviously, you're talking about Inspector Gregson. Yes, though at the time, I didn't know the man's name. And there was no time for introductions. I value my life over manners. By which you mean that the inspector was there to assassinate you, I suppose? That was certainly the impression given by the gun pointing in my direction. Yeah, but if he was there to do it, he would have just shot it. He wouldn't have waved it around. But I've never seen the muzzle of a revolver shake about so much in all my life. Anyone would think the man had never shot somebody before. Believe it or not, most of us haven't. Anyway, there was no time to call for the help of the crewman at the door, so I dealt with the man myself. While I was holding a gun, I brought my hands to a gunfight.
Hold it!
Even though the man had a gun, that was a very brave move, wasn't it? Ha 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 ha. My Ippon Sway is far faster than a bullet, I can assure you. But surely all that commotion caused the crewman to come in, didn't it? Yes, of course. He burst in immediately without knocking. The inspector hurled himself at the stocky fellow and just managed to slip past him to make his escape. The outstanding guard does it again. Luckily, there aren't many situations I can't get out of using a quick Ippon Sui throw.
Hold it!
The crown snapped off and the glass covering the face of the watch was cracked. Preferable to the man's head being pulled off of his spine cracking, wouldn't you say? Not that the man was spared for long, a bullet to the chest soon saw to that. But the point is, the broken pocket watch doesn't prove that a murder took place. Absolutely not. All the possible watch proves is the power of my jujitsu throw. Whatever you say, it doesn't quite ring true that no shot was fired in that cabin. Because there was an obvious bullet hole in the wall. Oh. What are you talking about? That's what the star of your lowbrow detective stories told you, is it? Well, I don't care for such fiction. Haven't you worked it out yet, you little stripling? No murder took place in my cabin. The inspector was clearly killed, having returned to Britain, because his body was found in London.
Hold it!
But there's no evidence that proves the victim ever returned to London alive. Just take a moment to think that idea of yours through now, stripling. What? If the inspector was killed on the steamship in France, then how on earth could he have got back to Britain? When people die, their bodies remain at that same spot. It's a devil of a thing. No, people pick up and move them, Jigoku. Especially murderers. They like to move the body around. Well, then obviously the culprit must have moved the body. How exactly? Carrying a corpse off a ship in your arms would raise a few eyebrows at least, don't you think? Well, yes, that's true, but all passenger luggage is inspected when it's unloaded from arriving vessels, and I would like to think the border police would query the corpse of an English gentleman as hand luggage. If the murder had taken place aboard the ship, you would imagine the body would have been disposed of at sea. There would be no sense in risking being caught by attempting to transport the body back to Britain. Yes, there would. You're trying to frame up Van Ziek for it because you hate him. That's killed that idea then. No, it hasn't, you dumb person. But perhaps not, Miss Susato. We've heard that the first-class passengers were under constant scrutiny by the crewmen posting to guard them, which would mean that the culprit had no opportunity to dispose of the body in the sea. Yes, that's true. So transporting the body to Britain may have been the only viable alternative. Dear me, you really are new to this, aren't you? I thought I'd seen perfectly clear, but it seems I'm going to have to explain it in words you can understand. I think I ought to alter my testimony. With your consent, of course, my lord. Here we go. I have no objection. State your amended testimony now. There is no possible way I could have transported the victim's corpse back to Britain. Press.
Hold it!
There's an idea. Think about it, stripling. All passengers and crew disembarked at the same time and passed through the same checks as the border. The symposium guests were then driven straight to the hotel in carriages organized by the ministry. And we met you as soon as you arrived at the hotel. So you did. Well then, remind me, did I have a corpse over my shoulder at the time? What? No. So, we're in agreement then. I couldn't possibly have brought the inspector's body back to Britain. Unless, of course, they've developed some clever device these days to instantaneously move things from A to B. Ha, reference to the third case. Funny you should say that. Professor Hairbrain's invention didn't actually work, if you remember, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, of course. The defense has become unusually quiet, I notice. Yes, because there's really nothing more to say. So that's his story. Well, I suppose if you think about it, whenever you drop a teacup in the office and it breaks, we don't say, Mr. Naruhodo must have been murdered there, do we? Is that a veiled threat about what might happen to me if I break another one? And the fact is that Inspector Gregson's body was found in the little room on Fresno Street. If he really was killed in Judge Shigoku's cabin, the body would have been moved somehow, obviously. Transporting a dead body over a country border, that would be impossible for the majority of people. But there must have been some special circumstances that made it possible for the culprit then. That could be a vital realization, I think, Mr. Naruhodo. Okay. So telling me that it's a way that the body was moved. So let me see here if I can come up with the way it was moved. By telegram. I don't think so. By pocket watch knob. No, I don't think that's a method of moving. By evacuation drill. Well, that happened at the time of the murder, but not at the time of the docking in Britain. Sword. Like a shish kebab? No. By passport. Nope. What I'm looking for is the ice, right? What I would present is the ice that was in the cup. Because that showed that there was a chiller on board. But I guess that's not really what they're going for here. They're not going for how the corpse was stowed away on the ship. They're going for how the corpse was taken off the ship and onto British soil without being inspected. The trunk's way too small. I'm going through these things one at a time. So, the Red-Headed League, not relevant, right? Vigil, not relevant. The letter of introduction. We already established they're on the SS Grouse, so not relevant anymore. Dismissal notice. That is involving, like, Vigil and 10 years ago. We're talking about transporting the body now, so not relevant. No. The gun. I presume it's Gregson's gun. But Gregson would have had his gun there, and Chigoku's saying he had his gun there, and so this doesn't really refute much. Policeman ear. Nope. This. Nope. Nope. This has to do with the room on the room where the body was discovered. It's a completely different place. This is not a method of transporting bodies. Probably most likely. This is the scene of the room where he found the body. No, where he found the body, where he found the body, where he found the body. Huh. The identification, which Gregson didn't have, but that's not really something we can present here. Nothing in here yet. 10 years ago. Too small to be relevant. 10 years ago. Passport that was before the murder. The sword. Evacuation drill, again, we already used it, so it makes it so unlikely we're going to use it twice. Already used it. So the best thing to present here is the autopsy report. But that's kind of a reach. So, not very confident here. It's just like the most relevant because it has hints in it about it being, the body being put in a chiller, right? So that's why I would present this. But again, that's kind of a stretch, right? That's not really good. That's not good.
Objection.
And the music didn't stop, which indicates I messed up. The reason why I think it's this to present on is because this is the new statement you had to have added to his testimony. 2, it's what the hint between Susato and Rinosuke's dialogue at the end of the cross-examination suggested we present on. So there's 2 reasons why you would present on this. Also, it's like a thing that seems like it'd be easy to present something on, just in general. So we're just basically looking for a way could be transported. So we ruled out the autopsy report. We presented that and it didn't work. Oh, maybe I presented the wrong autopsy report. I presented Clint's as opposed to Gregson's. Did I do that? Let's do it just to make sure I didn't present the wrong one.
Objection.
No, okay, it just repeats. Great, so I lost 2 lives on that. Okay, so just making sure that was Gregson's autopsy report, not Clint's. Okay. So that's wrong. That was what I presume would be the best choice. Okay, let's go through these again. Red-Headed League. No. Photograph of Mr. Vigil. No. Letter of introduction. That's a ticket for the SS Grouse. No. Dismissal notice. No. Photograph. No. Gun. No. Policeman make a figurine. No. This is not a way to transport the corpse. No, it's not a way to transport the corpse. Neither is this. Time of death is uncertain, but it was wrong, so... Not a way to transport the corpse. 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 Definitely not a way to transport the corpse. For the final victims. Clint's autopsy report. Again, not a way to transport the corpse. Not a way to transport a corpse. Not a way to transport a corpse. I mean, he would be a corpse. Yes, it's a way to transport himself, but not when he's dead. Not a way to transport a corpse. There was that, there was that, there was that. So, that leaves me with this. But like, how is there a way to transport a corpse in here? It's way too small, you would think, to put a corpse in it. Yeah, what special circumstance? Oh! That's tricky, game. That is tricky. Well, I don't know if it's right or not. I'm gonna try and see if it's right. Wow, that almost got me. Okay. Sorry for that delay. There's no possible way you could have moved Inspector Gregson's body, you say? I would say the opposite is true. But I'm wondering why I went, oh, that traveling case was in that photograph. And what's that supposed to mean? Far from being impossible for you to do, the transporting of Inspector Gregson's body back to Britain is something only you could do. What are you talking about, Rinosuke? As well as being a judge, Mr. Jikoku is also Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Which means he's exempt from having his luggage searched when he enters the country. We'll alert that when we first met you upon your arrival in London. Well, all those passport checks and luggage searches at the border took rather a lot of time. I must say, I'm very envious of your ministerial status. You didn't have to go through any of that, did you? Oh, I knew you would be jealous. I presume you recall this, Judge Jigoku. It's a photograph we took on the foyer of the hotel to mark the occasion. As the court will note, you have with you your large travel trunk. Large enough, in fact, to have a corpse inside. Mr. Naruhodo, surely you're not suggesting... I'm afraid I am, yes? 3 days ago, when we were chatting innocently with the new arrivals from Japan in the hotel, the body of Inspector Gregson was just meters away from us, inside Judge Jigoku's trunk. Order! Order! Order in the court! I'm skeptical, counsel, that a grown man's body could fit inside even the largest travel trunk. It could. Because I happen to know that the witness himself, a man of considerable size, fits inside his trunk. And verifying that would be extremely simple, wouldn't it, Judge Jigoku? But inside his trunk, how horrifying. And after we'd spoken with you at the Great Waterloo Hotel, you had the opportunity to visit the apparent scene on Fresno Street, taking your trunk with you in a cab to deposit the inspector's body. I didn't have to listen to this I don't have to listen to this nonsense. Dr. Gory, the coroner who examined the body, has confirmed the possibility. She's acknowledged that there are no signs that steps may have been taken to disguise the true time of death. The onset of the body's decomposition could have been delayed by storing it in a refrigerator. Counsel, as I remember explaining yesterday, refrigerators of the requisite size are few and far between. Yes, I'm sure they are, but one place they're certainly found is on large ocean liners. Such ships are equipped with electrically refrigerated cold rooms to keep food fresh on their long sea voyages, and the SS Grouse is no exception. Professor Mikotoba told me about it only yesterday. Well, Judge Jigoku? However much you prolong this debate, you can't eliminate the truth. All the evidence points to you being the killer. I don't think he's the killer. I honestly think, I still think that Kazuma is the killer. Well, this is all very heartening. I can see that it was a wise move, letting Asogi and you embark on this study tour. What are you talking about now? Logical reasoning, of course. All court proceedings will be built on logical reasoning in the new century. And I can see that you've both laid firm foundations for that already. Judge Jigoku, please stop diverting attention from the issue at hand. The defense has made an accusation against you. How do you respond? Respond? There's really no need for me to respond, is there? Why ever not? Because before you could even begin to answer the question of when the victim was killed, you must first establish one key fact. Where was the victim killed? It's quite logical. The actual scene of the crime. The prosecution's stance is unaltered. The killing took place on Fresno Street when the gunshot was heard. As the accused, Brock Van Zeek shot the victim in point-blank range. Since no tangible evidence exists to disprove the prosecution's claim at this time, the defense's deductions amount to little more than an elaborate fairy tale. I'm afraid that's how the logical reasoning the British are known for really works, young stripling. The victim was shot in that little room on Fresno Street and died instantly. I'm afraid it's the prosecution's claim that's the only fairy tale here. How could you say that? Quite simply, because the claim directly contradicts a certain piece of evidence in our possession. Very tantalizing, counsel. I think you had better explain yourself to the court, don't you? The prosecution claims that Inspector Gregson died instantly when he was shot at the scene on Fresno Street. But this evidence clearly contradicts that claim. They died instantly. Okay. Red-Headed League article. Died instantly? Nothing to do with it. Photograph of Mr. Vigil about dying instantly? Nope. Ship ticket? Nope. Dismissal notice? Nope. This photograph? Nope. Gun? Well, it could kill someone instantly, but wasn't the case. Wasn't fired, so. This? Nope. Wig? Nope. This is our alternative explanation, but we've already spent it. I'm still wondering how this is going to come into play. I don't really see how it's going to work here, though. Autopsy report. I mean, that would be the simplistic thing to present. Didn't die instantly. Not the best candidate. Notice board. Contradicts he died instantly. There's not much in this, there's just Gregson's body and nothing really around it. Pocket watch. Okay, so it does say it was died instantly upon being shot. Filling out some things. So now this, that. Okay, autopsy report. Picture. Nope, nope, nope. 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 Nope, nope. Nope. It's going to be that picture of the autopsy report, really. But I don't know how this picture shows anything. I'm gonna try it, though. Why did that work? A photograph of the victim in the very location you claim he wasn't killed. Yes, but the point is, the posture of the body itself. If Inspector Gregson had been shot there in that room, it's out of the question that his body would have been curled up in a ball like that. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but your logic is flawed. He could have easily have adopted that fetal position due to the pain of the shot, which subsequently proved fatal. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Judge Jigoku, but it's your logic that is flawed. What? According to this autopsy report, the victim died instantly. He would have felt no pain, much less have been able to draw himself into that position. Which begs the question of why the victim's body is curled up in that way. Though the answer should be abundantly clear by now. You are suggesting it got rigorous while stuffed in a case in that shape? The inspector's body took on that posture ahead of its arrival on Fresno Street, before it was coldly turned out on the floor from the inside of a large travel trunk. No, you're quite right. The shape of the body, it looks exactly as if it had been kept in a confined space. Gaishigoku, present your trunk for examination. I believe it's very possible that it will contain traces of the victim's blood. Present my trunk. I refuse. What? On what grounds? I am the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Empire of Japan. I shouldn't have to put up with this treatment just because of some stripling's baseless accusations. In other words, Judge Jigoku, there's blood in your trunk. I decline to answer that. As the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have privileges allowing... At this moment, you're not a government minister. You are a witness in the trial in Britain's highest court. I don't care who you are, or what your status outside this courtroom might be, you will not withhold information. Nothing is more important than the truth. Order in the court. Well, Mr. Jigoku, what's it to be? You can't be serious. You did it? Man, Kazuma's a good actor. Have you no shame at all, Kazuma Sogi? What? Very well, I admit it. I did bring the inspector's body into the country. Inside my trunk. Exactly as postulated by the defense. What? You... Dear God! Outrageous! So it was you. You admit to it. No, I admit to nothing more than what I've said. Of killing the man, I certainly have no recollection. What on earth is that cryptic statement supposed to mean? I merely disposed of the inspector's body, which was left in my cabin, in order to avoid unwanted attention. Yes, and framed up Van Zeke for the murder. To avoid unwanted attention. Very sophisticated. As the judicial assistant over there pointed out, I had no chance to throw it into the ocean. So I decided my only option was to bring it into Britain with me and dispose of it somewhere else. You can't still deny it. If you didn't do it, then who on earth did kill the man? Here we go. As you know, there was one other person in my cabin that night. He had the opportunity. And moreover, he'd already accepted a mission to take the inspector's life. Yep. Oh, here we go. That's right. Who else could it have been? It was you, Kazuma Asogi. You. I never thought you'd stoop to this, Cicero Jigoku. You've taken the words straight out of my mouth. Prosecutor Kazuma Sogi. You thought by leaving the body in my cabin you could pin the crime on me, did you? No, you had instructions. You are working together, you people. While the prosecution counsel has already admitted to visiting the witness's cabin on the night in question. Yes, on an assassination mission, no less. You wouldn't. So, what do you make of that, young stripling? You've heard my testimony now, and that's all I have to say on the matter. I'll admit to nothing more. Well, I'd make two things of that. One is, it's a good place to save and stop recording for tonight. But, second thing is, you just admitted my client is innocent. Yay, can we get to the verdict now? But no, Ryonosuke is going to be like, I'm not going to stop until I get to the truth. Not just an innocent verdict for Van Zeke. All the way to the truth. I can see how late it is. Yeah, that's late. Okay. Cool. Everything, all of my, like, guesses, my hypotheses are holding up so far. So, we'll see if they become right.